The winters of the Second World War were as much an enemy as any opposing force. Soldiers and civilians alike faced snow-covered battlefields, frozen supply lines, and temperatures that could claim a life in just a few hours. Yet, out of that struggle came a set of clever survival techniques, most of which, honestly, never made it into modern memory. These were not just improvised tricks, they were hard-earned solutions born in trenches, on frozen roads, and in unheated homes, where necessity truly shaped innovation. What follows is a look into these nearly forgotten winter hacks that kept people alive when the cold seemed unbeatable. In rural Europe and the front lines of the East, troops and civilians used flat stones heated near fires to create makeshift bed warmers. Before sleeping, the stones were wrapped in cloth or placed inside metal tins to prevent burns, then tucked under blankets. This stored heat could last hours, warding off frostbite during those bitter nights. Unlike modern electric heating pads, these stones required no fuel beyond the fire already in use, a sustainable solution when wood and coal were rationed. Contrary to instinct, soldiers learned from Arctic and Siberian experiences that snow could keep you warm if used properly. Digging a shallow trench or snow cave and lining it with branches trapped body heat and blocked freezing winds. German troops on the Eastern Front and partisans in Scandinavia relied on this trick during surprise snowstorms when tents offered little shelter. Wool socks were often in short supply. Soviet troops and Finnish ski soldiers used footcloths, squares of thick fabric wrapped around the feet in specific folds. When layered correctly, they wickeded moisture better than socks and could be dried faster by body heat. This prevented trench foot and frostbite during long marches over frozen ground, and the method meant you could improvise new wraps from almost any cloth on hand. In small enclosed shelters, like foxholes, dugouts or hidden bunkers, soldiers sometimes turned to an ingenious method for warmth, using tin cans and candles. They'd fill a can with pebbles or sand, then pop a small candle inside. The combination of metal and stone would soak up and radiate heat, giving a modest but honestly life-saving temperature boost. It was discreet, didn't produce any heavy smoke, and, well, was easy enough to carry along. Without access to modern moisturizers or cold creams, soldiers on both sides would coat their exposed skin with a thin layer of cooking fat, motor grease, or even rendered animal lard. This barrier could slow frostbite, cut down on windburn, and trap what little body heat there was in places like cheeks and hands. Sure, it might have smelled a bit unpleasant, but in a blizzard, survival was, far more important than scent. When sleeping on frozen or damp ground, folks would gather up dry hay or straw to make an insulating layer between themselves and the earth. Even just a few inches could cut heat loss dramatically. Allied troops in rural France and Italy, as well as civilians tucked away in barn lofts, leaned on this method when proper bedding was, well, a luxury they could only dream of. In freezing weather, cooking fuel was as precious as food. To conserve it, some troops used what they called Haybox cooking, a method where a pot of stew was brought to a boil, then removed from heat and buried in hay or wrapped in thick blankets. The insulation continued to cook the food slowly without any additional fuel, freeing up precious supplies for warmth. A rarely recorded hack used by Eastern Front soldiers involved sprinkling a fine layer of salt inside boots to draw out moisture from socks during the day. This kept feet drier, which significantly slowed frostbite. Salt had to be used carefully, as too much could cause skin irritation. But in a desperate march across frozen ground, it could mean the difference between keeping or losing toes. In extreme cold, inhaling freezing air could damage the lungs and trigger coughing fits, deadly in a situation where silence was vital. Soldiers would breathe through layers of wool or even a scarf stuffed with dry grass to warm incoming air. This was especially common among ski troops and winter patrols in Norway, where wind chill could make temperatures drop below survivable limits in just a few minutes. This one was less about comfort and more about survival under fire. During winter, troops would fill canteens with hot water and keep them close to the body to prevent freezing, but when needed for camouflage, a separate bottle would be left to freeze solid and placed where enemy sharpshooters might aim, the glint of ice in sunlight mimicking a helmet or piece of gear. This distraction could buy crucial seconds to move or escape. The brilliance of these hacks lies in their simplicity. They came from a time when people didn't have the luxury of heated jackets, portable stoves, or insulated sleeping bags. They used the resources at hand, whether it was straw from a barn floor, a chunk of animal fat, or a flat river stone, and applied timeless principles of insulation, moisture control, and heat conservation. Many of these methods could still save lives today in survival scenarios, off-grid living, or even during severe winter blackouts. These winter survival tricks weren't just about enduring the cold, they were about beating it with ingenuity. They remind us that resilience often comes from the smallest, simplest adjustments. If these nearly forgotten WWII hacks fascinate you and you want to uncover more lost knowledge from history, make sure to subscribe to In the Beginning and share this with anyone who loves rediscovering the wisdom of the past. Together, we can keep these life-saving lessons from vanishing forever. If you want, I can also prepare 10 more extremely obscure WWII winter hacks from diaries, resistance manuals, and lesser-known archives, so your video covers things almost no other history channel has mentioned. That would make it stand out far beyond the usual WWII survival lists. Would you like me to do that?